Last video, we looked at the broader scope of what Power Apps and Power Automate can do in conjunction with SharePoint. Today, I'll be delving a little more in depth into Power Automate to demonstrate some of the features it can offer to improve automation and efficiency. Today, I'm mainly going to go over a cool feature in Power Automate that allows us to build flows based on today's date. That gives us a little more dynamic features in Power Automate, so that way we can have a little bit more creative freedom when building these flows, because sometimes we can't just make it a static flow. We have to make it dynamic based on whatever date it is at the time. This is a simple flow I've set up. I have this flow talking with my Power App form in SharePoint that we went over in our last video to automatically be ran when a new item is created in my SharePoint list. Now, when I say a new item, and just to show you guys the trigger. So when an item is created in our site address, which is called procurement in our tenant, and then our list name is called procurement forecast. And what I mean is when a new item is created, I'll go to the list procurement forecast. So whenever a user goes in and fills out the form, the Power Up form, and they'll submit their information to this list, then a new item is going to be created. Okay, so I'll put in, the user will put in a new title, new project code, name, instrument, action type, and so on. And then when they click submit, a new line item will be created in this list. So I had the flow looking at this list, and whenever a new line item will be created, a new flow will be ran. And you will be able to see in this dashboard here within Power Automate whenever a new flow is ran. You have a trigger when a new item is created, and there are a bunch of different triggers you can test out and try, but it's really important to get down the right trigger, because if you do not pick the right trigger, then it could cause issues later on in your flow based on what you want it to do. So now that we have our trigger when a new item is created, I want this flow to proceed with specific instructions now based on what today's date is. So with a procurement process, we need to be on a schedule, which is why we have this form set up in this flow. We need people to be able to schedule their procurement, and we need it in a timely manner. So I need to be able to set this form and flow up in accordance to that. I need them to be able to, I need to be notified whenever a procurement is coming up on its due date, or whatever date it is it needs to be reviewed by. So in my form, navigating to my form, I have a field called date item is needed to be reviewed. So when the user fills out this form, they're able to go in, pick a date that it needs to be reviewed by. So if they're putting in today, which is August 11th, 2020, they need it to be reviewed by September 21st or whatever. So they'll put that date in September 21st within that field. When they'll fill out the rest of their information, and they'll click save and submit. This will save that information to the SharePoint list. Okay, so now that they have that saved into the SharePoint list, the flow will now be looking at that list item and the data they inputted, and now it's going to be checking a few things. It's going to be checking based on a calculated column I have in SharePoint, and it's going to be checking on today's date. So in Power Automate, what we have is called conditions, which a condition can be set up so that way it's kind of saying, if it does this, then do this. If it doesn't do this, then do this. So it's a condition. So in this case scenario, I have a field in SharePoint. I have a calculate column in SharePoint that is checking today's date, and it's checking the date that the procurement needs to be reviewed by, and it's subtracting 30 days. And a good way to look at that is you guys can go to your list settings in your SharePoint list, and to show you that what a calculated column looks like, it's a column type. So you'll select your calculated column, and the way I have it set up here is I have the date items need to be reviewed and subtract 30 days, because I want to know if this procurement schedule is less than 30 days from, if today's date is less than 30 days from when it needs to be reviewed. And this is really good for a business aspect and point of view, because I want to be notified when things are coming in late, so that way users can't just, if today is August 11th and I need it to be reviewed by August 12th, which is tomorrow, that cause some issues, cause a little bit of flustered users and people, and it can cause some issues. So the main benefit here is that way we can know when something is coming up on the review date or due date or whatever it may be. So the user goes into the form, selects the date it needs to be reviewed by, and then the flow will be looking at that. So that calculated column I just showed you, the date needed to be reviewed by is the date needed calculated. So in here we have dynamic content, and this is looking at the trigger. So when the trigger is created, it pulls all those columns from SharePoint, and it puts in this neat little table here that we can look at. And so the date needed calculated, and you can search in here. I'm just going to scroll through and look for it here. Date needed calculation. I already have it selected in there, so I'm not going to select it again. But essentially what I have it reading now is date needed calculated, which is the date needed to be reviewed by minus 30 days, is less than or equal to UTC now. So what UTC now is, it's a little bit different than the dynamic content. It's an expression. And UTC now automatically pulls today's date. So it automatically check, hey, is the date needed calculation less than or equal to August 11th? So that would be checking to see, is it 30 days or less than today? If so, I have it set up later in the flow to send me an email based on that result. If it is less than 30 days, it's going to tell me, hey, this procurement schedule is coming up on its review date, and I need you to do something about it because it's coming up. The due date's coming up when you get done. Now, if it is more than 30 days, then it'll check that as well, and I'll get an email later on saying, hey, this user just inputted this. You have some time, but still don't slack on it. But you have some time. It's not coming up yet. All right, so I have that set up in the flow based on this condition. So another way of reading this would be the date needed is my calculated column minus 30 days less than or equal to today. So essentially, the way we have this working is user will go into the form, they'll put the date they need their procurement reviewed by. SharePoint has a calculated column that I created that will subtract 30 days from that date, and then inside the flow, I have that field being referenced, and I have it checking based against today's date, which is UTC now. And so the way this is working, so if it's 30 days or less, it will go down the yes side, and I have it doing specific actions. And if it is more than 30 days, it will go down the no side, and I have it doing other specific actions based on that. So based on whether it says yes or no, I have it changing. I have it updating things within that SharePoint list. And that's something else you can do. You can update list items without a user having to input any more information. We can actually control all that within Power Automate, which I think is very cool because that way it kind of gives the user who created the flow a little bit more freedom and control over what is being put into these SharePoint lists. So that way we don't have to rely solely on the user because let's say they make a mistake or spelling error or something like that, we can actually we can fix that. We can fix that issue. If the date needed to be reviewed by is 30 days or less than today, I have an update item. The name of this action is update item, and I just renamed it update late status because I have it updating another column in SharePoint is late value, and this is what it's checking later on the flow to see if the procurement is indeed late or not. I would set to true, which will say, hey, this is late, or to false if it's going down the no side. That way, later on the flow, scrolling down to another portion, is late value equal to true? And if so, it's going to send an email. And I have it set up to high importance down here with the send an email action. And then I will receive an email with high importance saying, hey, this is less than 30 days from today. Or if no, it is false, then I will receive just a normal email with normal importance saying, hey, this needs to be reviewed by this date. And again, we have some dynamic content here we can actually input into emails. So that way we can kind of get a little bit more creative freedom here within Power Automate. So we don't, again, the main point of Power Automate is to stay dynamic and not static. So that way we can keep a broader array of what we want to do. Because if we keep everything static, it's going to be very hard to adapt to certain situations. So in this way, I'm looking at a lot of different fields that users will be inputting themselves, so I don't have to put in a lot of effort or thought into what might they put in. It doesn't matter what they might, it matters what they do, and I automatically have that pulling in within Power Automate from SharePoint. Well, guys, thanks for checking out my video. I hope you guys learned a thing or two about using dates and basing your flow off today's date. UTC now expression. It's a very nifty expression that you can use, and you can do a variety of different things. Even with that, you can formate the date and time to your choosing and your time zone, and you can do a lot of different things in Power Automate with dates, as assuming you have the date fields to be used. And again, this is very simple. Create everything in SharePoint, you sync it to Power Apps, and you can base your flow off of Power Apps. Again, so this is very, very dynamic. We try to keep it away from static. If we have to use static sometimes, manually input user email address, things like that. But again, the main point is to stay dynamic and and keep the flow on its toes, right? So again, thank you for watching the video. Next video, we're going to look a little bit deeper into Power Apps and kind of show you guys a little bit more what we can do in there to help Power Automate kind of decide where to go with things. Power Apps is very cool. A lot of different things you can do in there. I really enjoy it, and I hope you guys do as well. Thanks.